Retro Rebel is brought to you by templeofgeek.com, your one-stop shop for all things geek. You can find all of our episodes and fulfill your sci-fi, fantasy, and geek culture-related needs at templeofgeek.com. Welcome to the Retro Rebel Gamecast, where we discuss gaming and related topics. Retro Rebel is released Fridays, and you can find this episode and much more by heading to templeofgeek.com or wherever you download your favorite podcasts. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Retro Rebel Podcast. My name is Stacy, and with me, as always, is my fellow Rebel co-host, Amanda. Peace.
Hello.
Welcome back. Well, I mean, both of us.
Welcome back to you.
This is a group welcome.
I've been keeping your seat warm for a couple
I appreciate it more than you know. So, but as it were, I have gotten to play some games and things have happened and the world continues to spin. So what's been going on?
I've just been playing Six Nymph like a little addict. It's so fun. It is the best free board game I've ever found. You can just shit talk your friends. It's all like sort of counting and memorization based. So if you are pretty good at keeping track of things, you can anticipate that when other people might forget and then set up little traps to make them pick up cards and things. It's very fun, and over Zoom with just a huge amount of shit talking, it's delightful. So I've been playing more of that than I'd like to admit, so much that I've gotten several achievements for it. And it's, as I'm sure you can imagine, not that easy to get achievements on a board game website. You know, you really got to put in the hours.
I was going to say, I know nothing and I can only imagine. So
yeah, so it is a fun little game. I highly recommend it for anybody that
you always are playing like these quirky or just like lesser known. Whether it be a game off of Game Pass that that I hadn't necessarily heard of, but is maybe like a diamond in the rough, so to speak. So yeah.
I mean, I haven't played a game on Xbox since I played As Dusk Falls, and as I'm sure we'll discuss later, I had a different experience with it than I feel perhaps I was supposed to.
Interesting. So, I'm interested to know because I have not had a chance to play it yet. And I want to, and I've only heard things about it. So what I have heard versus your personal experience, I think we're going to have a couple of those stories in this episode. So, well, that's good. I have not gotten a lot of new games to play lately, or I haven't played a lot of new games lately. But the one that I have played that I had been looking forward to more so than I even thought I would was Stray. And I was considering buying it, and I think I still will. I think it's $30 here in the United States, and so I probably will buy it. But I played it for a few hours on PlayStation 4, and I was taken aback. I was very surprised at how much I enjoyed being a cat. Because I'm not.
Who wouldn't enjoy that?
I know I'm just not really a cat person per se, but I know it's just. But it was very. I played it with I started playing it with my 4-year-old, so I thought this would be something that would keep her attention for a minute because it was a cat, and it's very much just that. You're a cat. Now it's post-apocalyptic. It starts out with you and your little cat family together. Just kind of functioning and being cats. Like you can go up and lay down next to some of your family members and just like y'all can play. Basically, the tutorial is teaching you how to be a cat and how to cat. It teaches you how to cat. And then when you kind of get separated from your family, that's when the game actually starts. And so, I've seen a lot of Let's Plays of people playing it and nothing about the story. So like I didn't ruin any of that stuff for myself, and I won't do that here either, but you get to be a cat, and I just can't explain how simple that premise is, but how like legit you are a cat. Like you can, if you just want to lay or nap or knock things off of a counter, you can do that almost as much
Yeah.
as you want to. So if you just want to be a jerk as a cat, which cats are many times, you can absolutely be that person or that cat. So highly recommend it. If that any of that sounds interesting to you, it's been very enjoyable. So I've actually had a lot of fun playing that game. But that's
I
all.
love that. That sounds so cute.
It is. It really was. That and of course I'm back on the Warcraft train. So
No,
yeah,
what?
I've been full time back.
Oh my
I know.
God.
I took a break
You can't quit.
as long as I could take, and I'm back. And I even bought I bought Dragonflight, and so we'll see. It's supposed to get back to the in game stuff in this patch or in this expansion is so much better than anything that was in the expansion before it. So it got back to the feel, but it took a long time to get there, like 2 patches, and I had already quit long before we got to that patch. And so getting back into it, it reminded me why I played. But I think some of the things we're going to talk about in this episode are reflected in bad practices in Blizzard products currently and in many video games, stuff we've talked about on lots of episodes.
Yeah.
So when you see those things rear their heads in Warcraft or in some of these other games where, behind time gated or paywalls or anything where it's unnecessarily complicated or difficult or financially, and the investment is greater than maybe the return, and it's all for the sake of the game, that's just takes so much away from the experience. And you can see it, and you can see where it probably should have been. And Warcraft has teetered on that line for a few expansions now, where it's gotten away from what made the game fun, and then it's just a grind and just time gated to keep you online as much as possible, as long as possible. And that just sucks. So that's just not much fun. But I have been having fun, and while I have fun, it's worth the $14 a month to have fun right now. So until it's not again.
Listen, I mean, I'm not going to judge you. I have definitely spent some money playing some games in my time. So no judgments over here.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, so that sounds pretty exciting. I mean, Stray looked really cute. I'm disappointed to see that at least at the moment, it's not on Game Pass over here in the UK.
I'm sad for you. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks so cute. I also saw like you could make the robots trip and stuff. Like it looks so funny. I just feel like I need to be a cat.
Yes. If anything, we got to find a way for you to be able to play it. So I've threatened for years to send you my PS3, but I don't think it's on PS3. So.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
My partner has a PlayStation 4, so hopefully I will be able to steal his console for a little bit and give it.
It's free on there. You got to. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully. I mean, once again, it sometimes is different over here in the UK.
Yeah.
But I will try to make a note to see if it is Stray is downloadable. I'm going to do that. I'll check on Friday. But anyway, shall we move on to gaming news?
Absolutely. Gaming news. What news doth you have?
I have a surprising amount of news. So first things first, about 24 hours ago, Call of Duty updated on the amount of bans that it's put out in its community for violating community guidelines and being horrible people and that sort of thing. And they have now banned over 500,000 players in an effort to improve community standards and make Call of Duty a better place to play. And I kind of think that's a good thing because Call of Duty has a notoriously toxic community. Maybe not as bad as a few other, but near the top as one of the worst communities that I've ever played in.
They're the reason why I don't have sound up on or I'm not connected to anything on the internet. It's like if I can't hear what's happening in the game, I don't hear anything else. Anything my team is saying about me, that's why.
Yeah, and that's fair. I don't think that I really play with my sound on. I try not to play with pug groups full stop.
Right.
Because it's awful. But that's good. You know, they're trying to be accountable. And we've linked to the story within the website, so you can have a look at that. The second one is that do you have news? Sorry, I'm just running ahead.
I have one thing, but honestly, it's not that big, so I can get it I'll tag it at the end.
Okay. So the second one is the PlayStation Network loyalty program. We've gotten more information about how that's actually going to work. So it's supposed to compete with Microsoft Rewards, except the loyalty program is going to have campaign-specific in-game reward trophies. So occasionally, for specific games, you will be able to go in, and if you're part of the loyalty program, get a special achievement trophy that other people can't get. That's interesting to me. It's nice that it's related to gaming. I don't hate that. Although I do feel like, what if you happen to not play any of the games that they feature in these campaigns? Like, you know, I, as you mentioned, play a lot of very niche stuff. Is this going to be something they even bother doing a marketing campaign about when it comes to loyalty marketing? Maybe not. But once again, I'll link the story. So if you guys want to have a look and see what you think about the trophies that are going to be on offer and the bespoke achievements that you can get, we do have a little bit more information on that. And then the last piece of news that I have is I recently went to the world's first fully immersive open world adventure.
What?
Which is called Phantom Peak, and it's here in London for a limited time. And they have basically taken over a half a city block and transformed it into a Victorian steampunk town filled with NPCs to offer quests to you so that you can basically play a video game in real life. And it was sick, man. It was sick. Now, it is more geared toward families and kids, right? And some of the people who are the professional actors were a bit surprised at a group of 8 fully grown adults with no children getting really into this adventure. But it's very much like Westworld in real life with like quest components. Very cool. If you have the opportunity to do anything like that or something like that comes to a city near you, I highly recommend it. It was very, very fun. Well worth the £34. We had hours of entertainment. We were giggling the whole way. It turns out I'm terrible at carnival games, even if someone's life is on the line. So
it's good to know for the future, you know, just in case.
And they have fun little souvenirs like this, which is a knitted fatipus. It's a fat platypus. One of the girls in the group bought it for me because I thought it was the cutest thing ever. And it's just so adorable.
It's
where are
adorable.
you ever going to get anything like this?
That's right. That is pretty adorable. A fatipus. Nice.
Yeah. So, and you got a little, when you completed the adventures, there was, I think, 12 different stories that you could complete. We managed to do 8 in the 4 or 5 hours that we were allowed in the session. And every one that you completed, you got a little card, a little playing card with the specific quest on it that you've done. So you could always go back and try to finish the rest of the quest another time. It was pretty cool, I have to say. It was very neat.
That is really cool. There is one of those in Birmingham here in Alabama that is Alice in Wonderland. And it has, awesome. Yeah, and they've got two week sessions. Like there's a week that they're doing it, I think next month, and then they're doing it again in November. And I've looked at it. It's like it's supposed to be for families, but it also looked like for little kids it could be terrifying because that is Alice in Wonderland. So
yeah,
I could see that being the case. Anyway,
yeah, this one was some mixed groups. They had like an app for you to follow along, and it did ask some questions about like, is this a family fun day? And then if you said no, then they had more adult themed things that you could do. But we did a mixture of stuff just to see what it's like. But it was really detailed.
Yeah.
It was very cool. It was huge. There was like even a little mini water ride and everything. It was.
That's fascinating, and I think that would be really cool and something that I didn't even know I needed, but would be really cool, you know. Well, I only have one piece of news, and it kind of segues into what we're talking about. So yesterday I was watching Jesse Cox on YouTube does these little 5-minute news segments, and it's really, he does them every day, and a lot of things that kind of go under the radar that I wouldn't have necessarily seen. I dig through the news and I always get something, but sometimes I'm not privy to this. And this was a couple of interviews that were done with Blizzard about how Blizzard is kind of they're kneecapping their own game right now. So if you've listened or followed the news on Overwatch 2, it's just been in turmoil since the beginning, since its entire production process and just the deliverables and what they promised from the beginning. None of it's the same. Originally it was supposed to just be and maybe an addition to Overwatch, where you just had a continuation of that. Now basically, they've gone to the point where Overwatch 2 will replace Overwatch 1. There will not be an Overwatch 1 anymore. So you kind of, if you were to play Overwatch 2, the servers and everything else that was dedicated to that other game will no longer work or function. They're going to shut them down over time. Mm-hmm. Now they're releasing these new characters that are supposed to be a part of Overwatch 2, but they are currently behind paywalls and DLC, not like purchase DLC, but like you have to buy the battle pass for it to get them. Right. And they also have their own in-game currency. So they took loot boxes out, but they're adding their own in-game currency. So it's like trading one devil for another. And all of it being nefarious, all of it's not on the up and up, and it's definitely not and that's what he was showing. Developer interviews talking about the purity of the spirit, like what they were trying to do, which was to create these new characters and make sure that it's even amongst all the players, so that when you bought Overwatch 2, you got all the characters that everybody else had. The problem is if you put these characters behind paywall, and this is what he was presenting. Part of the dynamic of Overwatch 2 is to select characters based on the other team's dynamic. And if you lose a match and you see that there's a hole in your defense or offense or healing, then you will drop your character, or somebody from your group will pick up another character to fill the gap. Well, what if this character is behind a paywall and they paid to have that character and you literally can't do anything about it because that character is not accessible by everybody that's playing the game? That you have to, basically it's the pay to win mechanic, and they're introducing it. So I don't know that it hasn't come to fruition to my knowledge, that they still haven't rolled that out yet. But that is something I think I know they're talking about it. They're tinkering with it now, play testing it. But it remains to be seen if there's enough people that will make noise about it to keep it from actually happening. So, but Blizzard, it's just right now they're all the worst business practices. Blizzard has that their bingo card is full. They've done all of them. So just very unfortunate. But that brings us. That's a poor segue to our main topic today. But
I think it was a fine segue.
Well, I guess in a way it is, and just the idea of choice in gaming in general, and when those choices are behind a paywall, or when those choices are non-existent, or when the choices don't matter. How much do choices matter in gaming, really, is what we wanted to talk about today. So, how much do they matter?
Well, I think first off, you've obviously identified a few other avenues where choice in gaming might not be something that people think about right away.
Right.
I know when I hear, does choice matter in gaming, I always think RPG, right? That's where my mind goes right away. Right. It goes to story, it goes to narrative. But actually having the choice to support creators and studios that you like by purchasing additional DLC or by buying a deluxe edition of the game or maybe even buying loot boxes. I mean, are these choices that we should have? Do they matter? Is the type of choice given to us changing how we feel about the experience? I think these are some general questions that we look at.
Absolutely. And so let's talk about first, hit on what you just said about choice that doesn't necessarily have to do with the narrative, just like from character choice and selection to character creation? How much or even to the choice to invest money in your game? So, do you think that choices like that, at least superficially, in what your character looks like, and character creation, gender selection, things like that, are those important choices? Should they be universally applied? Does it matter by the genre?
I would say for me, character creation is always like a nice choice to have because for me, it already gives me that immersive experience picking a character and thinking in my mind about what kind of person they're going to be and, what the fantasy associated with them are. I do find it harder when you're pinned in, especially if the character you're playing doesn't match your gender, which is often the case if you're a female gamer. It is a little bit harder to get into the story just because like the options that the character will naturally have or sometimes the way they deal with things doesn't really align with how I would do them. It's funny because like a very recent situation happened where I've recently got a car and I pulled into a petrol station to get gas and I had my windows rolled down. I was listening to music and I'm just going to pay at the pump. And a guy decided that he needed to tell me that I need to get back into my car, put my engine back on and roll my windows up because someone might take the dash cam in my vehicle. And because as a woman, you're just conditioned to not cause problems because that's how you get stabbed, right? I would just got back into my car, rolled up my windows. Yes, sir. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas if this was a video game, right, then I'm pretty sure that a male character would tell him to do one. Yeah, but that's not realistic to what life is actually like for a woman. Well, most women, I don't want to speak for everyone, but for somebody like me where you just try not to cause problems and not get yourself into situations, in my mind I was cursing him 7 ways to Sunday, but what actually came out, oh, thanks, that's such a good suggestion. No, thanks for that. Thanks. You know what I mean? And then you just hate yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. No, I get
so
it. And, I think character creation, I think is absolutely, I think it's an integral part to certain types of games. I'm also of the mind that there are games where I am completely, and I guess it's probably where I am in life and how I play games now and look at them. But I'm very okay with playing the game the way that the creator of the game wanted me to. Like, say, for instance, I'll use like Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice. You play a female lead. And I never at any point felt like and this is just my experience in this particular game. I knew what the game was going into it. I knew there wasn't character creation. I knew that, this was the character that you're going to play. And accepted that. I mean, this is not like this step-by-step process that I had to do to learn to be able to accept to play this game. It's like, no, I just read it. I was like, that seems like a cool game. I'm going to play it. And I'm cool with this being the lead character. But I also understand representation matters. And I can say that anytime I've ever played a game where I can create a character, I have never created a female character. I've never done it, So I get it. When I can
and I'm
play.
sure it's not because you hate women. It's just
No.
because, like, I feel like we just sort of go with what we know.
I'm the character in this story, and so and I don't have time to play it twice usually. So I'm going to play this one time, and I'm going to play it as me or some version of me, And sometimes I very rarely, and I know you do this, and I would like to do this maybe in the future, is to maybe create a narrative for that character. Before when I'm creating the character, especially if like in a Skyrim or a similar game where you're playing a different race or something like that, come up with a backstory. I think that kind of thing, like real role playing and stuff that you might do in Dungeons and Dragons, I think that would be really cool and would add some depth to the character. But generally, when I'm creating mine, I'm creating a version of me playing in the game. So I do see the merit of it, but I also, understand that representation matters and that I could see that being an issue if I never got to play me in a game, if that made sense. If I never saw anything like that. Well, what about, I want to touch on these other two a little bit more briefly and then get into more specific comparisons. But
Mm.
you mentioned the pay to win mechanic. Is there a place for, real currency, in-game currency that fits a model that seems to be in the best interest of the gamer? See, there's a balance between, okay, the developer's making money, but this seems like a fair investment of time and
Yeah.
resources, and not just a money grab and a paywall for you to, win the game. Like, where
To
is
be
it used
honest,
well?
um, I feel like they tried to do it well in Diablo because wasn't there plans for you to be able to sell items that you got in game to other players for real money, and then Blizzard would just like take a cut of the transaction fee or whatever?
That is what I understand.
I don't think it actually happened,
No, it
but I
didn't.
think that was the plan.
Yeah.
And for me, that is where I think the most truest extra game economy is, right? Because what everyone is doing still is circumventing the system by using gold farmers and all sorts of whatever.
And that's
And
backfiring on all of them.
yeah,
Always has.
yeah. So I think if there was something like that in the middle, because I think where we all sort of hate the idea is that game developers create this fake thing and then charge us money to just get as much as we want of this fake thing. Do you know, like it just
Right.
seems so stupid. Whereas if I am fishing in World of Warcraft and I catch some rare fish that you need for something else, and I want to sell you those fish just like in the real world, I kind of loved if they would be able to facilitate that, because then there's a real scarcity. Like I'm spending my real time in my real life to do something that actually physically matters.
Right.
And I feel like games sort of are missing that. So I think where decisions could matter more is if we could actually influence microtransactions, influence the economy, create supply and demand, like actually have the digital world mimic the real world, because right now it really doesn't. Microtransactions are an infinite supply of bollocks that never run out. And if they do put a cap on it, like with NFTs, like they tried to do, it's artificial and disgusting. Do you
Right.
know, like, and people don't like it. So I think if I decide to sit there all day in my real life and fish in World of Warcraft, and that's what I want to do, I kind of love that you would actually get some benefit out of it. And I think that is where your decisions would actually matter. Right now, microtransactions, it's just the haves versus the have-nots, because for most people, you could definitely plunk down an extra 20 quid to get whatever you wanted, but not everyone has that option, and that just puts them at a disadvantage where they have a less cool looking character or like less ingredients or less mounts, or like it's just disadvantaging people, and they
Right.
have no way to ever get to that point because the grind is so unrealistic that
Right.
you'd have to not have a job.
Well, and I think I think back then that used to be that's the challenge of any game, is how do you make the grind worth the time? And in the past before, and I remember it's changed probably just because of life and family, but I didn't mind the grind in an RPG. I didn't mind. In fact, that was part of it, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because there was a reward. If I sat here and I would grind for a while, I could go in and wax the boss, and it would just be easy because the boss isn't going to get harder just because I was grinding for the last 2 days. He's a finite, or the boss is going to be finite. I can get as good as I want to before I go in there. And so there was like I reaped, a reward for the time that I invested. I think that equity of opportunity that you just mentioned is the most important component. Is that it's not that everybody has the same things, or I can pay for all of us to have the same things. It's we all have the same opportunity to get that fish. And if somebody else gets that fish and sells it to you and you don't want to wait for it, well, then that's your choice. But you got it from them. I didn't get it from the company. I didn't pay money to get that fish from the company necessarily. I got it from you because you're the one that invested the time. But both people end up winning from that, I guess. We both could have fished for it, but you did. The difference is the way the business is now is I could pay enough money to be able to get that fish, whether you got it or not. And then all that time that you invested was effectively wasted.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think I think also having the choice to purchase a full experience versus a chopped up season pass, whatever, that's something that no one's really talking about,
Right.
because I don't know about you, but the second something I hear this game is free to play,
Yeah.
unless it's part of Game Pass, which technically isn't free to play, we do pay for that and you
Right.
can get full game. That's not what we mean. But like anything that's an F2P game, instantly I'm like trash, loaded for microtransactions. They're going to get you excited and then they're going to ask money for it, or it's going to get so slow or what, like
Right.
I want the option to say like, right, you can play this game free, or you can give us 60 quid right now and you can do whatever you want.
One
Do you know,
time.
like,
One time though.
yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
yeah, I agree. And I don't even mind paying for DLC. There was an article written the other day that was trying to put like a timeline. Is 20 hours enough to warrant the $60 whatever? Like, who's to say? Who's to say what that is?
I
It's so
spent more than that in 4 hours at the bar,
it's
you
so
know, like,
subjective, and I really think that may be one of the best ways. How much does it cost for you to go to the movies right now, just for one person? And if
mm,
you got a
mm,
drink and a soda, that's like $40. And so,
yeah,
and that's pretty cheap for a night movie with drinks and a soda. It's like 12 or $15 just for those two. Your ticket's $15 most likely, at least. And so, just think of it. And that was 2 hours. If you got any more than that, well, that was the amount of time, that you just, you paid for that entertainment. Look at how
yeah.
equitable that is to other forms of entertainment. So, that's a good litmus test, I think, for it. It may not be the best or the be all, but I do think it's a good way to compare it. And
I mean, sometimes games are too short, and that is if they don't tell a complete and compelling narrative.
right,
I know that James Stephanie Sterling talks a lot about um what was it, like the Siege of the Squad, that like Victorian sort of cop game that was only like
right.
4 or
That was more of a
5 hours
tech
long.
demo. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and is like that is too short, right? Because
Right.
it just started getting good and then was
Well,
over.
in part, and so
Um,
much of that was not even controllable. Like it was just cutscenes, and so like a large portion, too large of a portion, was actually just you watching the gameplay itself.
yeah.
So the 4 hours wasn't even a true 4 hours.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. And so who's to say that? But I definitely think that the pay to win mechanic has negative connotations, all of them deserved. And I have not seen it done very well often. I have not seen it done
Mm,
well. Lastly, this other little caveat I wanted to ask about is the different versions of the game. This
mm.
this started probably prior to the game. I want to say it was either Prey. It was the one where you had the two factions, and you had the hunters and you had the monsters that could evolve. Maybe the one where the monsters could evolve,
Oh yeah. Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
you could be a monster or you could be one of the hunters.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember that game.
and they had different tiers, and all of this was, they had like the 5-year plan or whatever the things, the same thing they did with Anthem and these other games where it was like,
Yeah,
this is our schedule of events over time. If you buy the game now, in 6 months we're gonna have this. None of that happened. Same
yeah.
things
It
with,
never does.
it never does. Just don't wait for us to buy again. And that was, James Stephanie Sterling said this about that game as well. And I think even Yahtzee Croshaw, from Zero
Mm,
Punctuation said it. These people that buy these games beforehand are part of the problem. Because you're giving them the money up front for a game that hasn't even been proven. You've seen nothing about it. All you have is a name and a list of different tiers of purchase that you can get and how they're kind of just partitioning that game off. So
mm,
some companies have done it right where there is a version of the game that comes with collectibles. World of Warcraft used to do that with their bundles. They would sometimes you get a statue or a map, or you'd get
mm.
you get in-game digital items and stuff that are just cosmetic, maybe a mount and stuff like that. I'm fine with, because that doesn't change the game. That's just perks for you. But other than that, I mean, do you see any examples of that being done well? And does it have a place, or in gaming in general?
I think in general, there's always a place for collectors, right? Like if this is a franchise that you love and you're wild about it. I remember when Fallout done the Pit Boys and people were crazy for this. They loved it.
Yeah.
And that's great. Like, I have t-shirts that have Star Wars on them and, Star Trek and all sorts, Marvel, blah, blah. So for me, being a fan of a franchise is no different. I bought my dad the Halo sword like many years ago and he has it on his wall. So I don't think like that's necessarily a problem, and I see deluxe game editions and things like that as just collector's items for people who are big fans of the franchise. They want to support it. They want to make sure the money goes directly to the studio, and do you know what, like they don't want to get a third party t-shirt or whatever, and so on and so forth. So the more directly you are related to the game release, the better chance the people who actually make the game will see some of that money.
Right.
But where I think it falls down is when it's a blatant cash grab and a total lie. So, or when you get things that really change the game. Like I know, was it Shadow of Mordor? One of the other ones had like a character that completely changed the game if you got it, or something like that. Or, then Fallout 76, I think they had that scandal with the canvas bags that were just plastic and not actually canvas.
Right.
Marketing matters, advertising matters, giving people what you say they're going to give them like matters. But I think there is a place for you to decide if you'd like to spend a little bit more to get something that you're going to cherish. I don't think that's a problem.
Right. Well, probably another conversation, but in the same, where you'll have a game like, I know that you enjoyed Anthem in a way a lot of other people didn't, but many games have been created with a sandbox with nothing in them, and that's to be added later. And so whether that is part of your involvement by financially supporting it so that they can add things to it or whatever, it's disingenuous to say the least that you buy something because they promised you something and then it ends up being none of the things that they said. Not only that, it never ends up being any of those, even though they.
I mean, where the hell is Milo, Peter Molyneux?
Man, it's never coming. Is what it was. That's where it is.
I still have a Connect. This is my third Connect, and still no Milo.
Oh well, I think they've realized that was never going to catch on. I still have the Connect too, but I think it's in a drawer. So, so. In actual choices actually in gaming, there are a lot of different ways that games do this. And so you mentioned one, a really good comparison, I think, which is either Last of Us 1 or 2, really. But I think The Last of Us 1 probably because that's the best, that has the biggest decision that you could make if you wanted to. And then you have As Dusk Falls. Now, I have not played As Dusk Falls, but I've played games similar to that where decisions do seem to matter. And there are many ways and that the story can go based on that. Detroit Become Human's another one of those that literally has.
I still want to play that game. Never ruin it.
It's got hundreds of choices, like hundreds of choices that can go in different ways, and different characters can die at multiple times, which changes the entire narrative, and it shows you that. So like when a decision is made and you finish a chapter, it will show you, and then it will show you all the different ways it could have, and it spider webs out. And you just went down this one, and it could have been any number of these multiverse choices. And so there's lots of replay value in that. We're not arguing the merit of that game or how good it is. Is that I liked it. But lots of choice. So comparing these two games, how do you see choice mattering in a game with a single player narrative like Last of Us versus As Dusk Falls, where you're playing multiple characters and choice does seem to influence the direction of the story?
Well, I think that choice is secondary to how good the story is.
Okay, fair.
And I briefly mentioned this while talking to Holly, so I don't know if you remember me saying, but I was playing As Dusk Falls. I got to the end of the first chapter. It showed me all the like branching off and everything that could have happened or whatever, and I was like, cool. And I never played it again.
Really?
Yeah, it's for me.
Yeah.
It's just not that interesting.
Yeah.
I don't care about the characters.
Right.
It's just like piloting someone else's life in a realistic scenario. It's not actually that fun,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. Maybe
Um,
too
you
real,
know,
you know?
because there are still things where you are a bit on rails. Like, it's not a huge spoiler that one of them, you're like a dad who has a family and you end up at a roadside motel on Route 66. Well, I'll tell you, there's your problem right there. Because if this was my life, I would have had things booked, ready to go. It wouldn't have been just a wander up situation to a random motel. Do you know? And
Fair
I
enough.
think that's the issue with choice, because it's only as strong as the narrative that is driving those choices. And something like The Last of Us 2, which is an extreme scenario where you couldn't possibly anticipate what you would do until you are there right in that moment, making that decision as that character through their eyes. Very different, I think,
Right. Right.
than just being an average Joe Blow with no special abilities and really not that unusual of a scenario, just doing whatever, you know?
So it sounds like it's even, especially in that circumstance, that it wasn't earned. Like maybe any of the decisions nor the investment in the story was earned. I wrote two quote while I was writing my notes. I wrote two quotes down. I'm not saying these are overly inspirational, but this is just what I thought of as I was writing it. One of them is the ending of any game does not matter as much as the journey. So, from my experience and what I've played, Mass Effect was one of those games that was divisive. Mass Effect 3, that is, the entire series. A lot of people were divided over the ending. I was not. I actually was fine with the ending. I liked the ending. I actually went back and I watched the other ones that I did not choose. But I thought a lot about the course of the 15 or 50 hours that I had already put into those games, all the decisions I had made up to that point. And I was like, okay, based on everything in this, I'm making an informed decision, which of these three I'm going to pick. And that's the one I'm going to live with, whatever it is. And I was cool with that. I know a lot of people did not like that, but I, and they got their happy ending that kind of encompassed everything and everybody wins. And that's great. But I was okay with it. I felt like it mattered because of the decisions I made over the course. There were characters that died. There were those decisions, I think, were the most important decisions because that shaped the majority of the time I played the game. The majority of the time I played the game, I made sure that what's the Krogan that you get to keep?
Oh, yay, I like him.
And so he was one of my favorite characters, kept him through,
Yeah.
the game and he becomes the king. And, I made sure Aiden died because he was the worst. And, sent him off
Yeah, he was the worst.
to be, he whined a lot. But, but those decisions, it was like they did have a ripple effect across the story. They didn't necessarily affect the end, but was that the most important part? And to me, it wasn't. I thought that that's just, the ending was icing on the cake. It was everything else I had done up to that point, whether it was saving the Rachni Queen or whatever else. In The Last of Us, I would have done the exact same thing Joel did. I believed I would have based on all of the circumstances. It's like you get to the point where you're like, this person could die or probably will absolutely die for nothing. But telling them that, it's a burden I hope to hold, and I choose to do that. And you go into, that's a difficult damn choice to make in the circumstances, but I understood it. And I was glad that they didn't give it to us to make. I was glad that they just chose something and went with it because that was what fit the story best. The other quote I had was a single player narrative will always leave the most lasting impression on fans. Not something like the 4-hour or whatever for that the Siege or the the game we were just talking about earlier. That's more of an on rails tech demo, or even a 6-hour. Although that one Call of Duty campaign was pretty powerful, but that's about the only one that was any good. The one where you actually got killed in the in the narrative. That was a twist on the story that nobody saw coming. I thought that they did a lot of really interesting things in that, some of it controversial, but I thought it was good. So, but narratives, those single player narratives, they stick with you. That's the ones that we talk about. Those are the ones that, to me, transcend other forms of art, where you're actually you have agency over the character, and the story is fantastic, and you're actually making choices that could change the direction that it goes. I mean, there's nothing in media or in entertainment or in art that does that. And I think that's what can make games so powerful, you know. So oh, bless you. Any other? So I had a couple of other examples, but again, it still comes down to like making choices, and do these choices matter, and are they good? Like David Cage is a controversial character in gaming, in that he makes strange choices, especially as they pertain to women. Heavy Rain was not his first foray, but his best to date. I think Heavy Rain's still probably one of the better games in terms of the story and what it takes to get to the end of that story. And there are a number of choices that you have to make, but it doesn't change the outcome necessarily. You know, the killer is still the same person, and you still make choices to get to that point. Do you see any of these games that you've played, Cyberpunk being one of those, I think that you and I have both played, where there are choices, but where did the choices matter? You know, did it change, the fact that you had choices in that particular game, make a difference at all? You know?
I mean, no, not really, because I mean, in Cyberpunk specifically, by doing side missions, I became so powerful that I just blew through everybody anyway.
Right.
Like, I don't think that is what they wanted for me, for my experience, but that's what ended up happening. And then when I finally got to the end, I was like, really? This is awful.
Yeah.
You know, like, I actually feel cheated, like you've stolen some of my life. And it's because no matter what you did, you were just up in the face of such extreme power. You were just one person, and even your ragtag group of whatever didn't matter. It never mattered from the beginning. And in that case, you got the illusion of choice.
Right.
You didn't actually have a choice. You were never going to win. Do you know?
See,
like,
and I wonder, now if they had created it, and I don't know because I haven't finished that game. I haven't played it in 2 years, whenever I've quit playing it. If that were the intention and they made it well known, like over the course of the narrative, it's like they build you up to be this person who might end up being able to be the savior. And then they smash that down and just basically tell you, in the end, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. You didn't have a choice. That maybe that the corporations are always going to control things and there's nothing else that you're going to be able to do. In a very emo, sad way, I would respect that ending. You know, I'd be like, okay, oh, wow. That would be more powerful to me if that's what they intended. But I don't know that that's what they intended. That may just be what
think
happened.
so. I didn't have the option to just become a crime boss and like,
Right.
just be like, nah, it's cool. You guys go ahead and save the world. I'm just going to run this bar. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Do you know, like, you were on rails on this whole adventure, you versus the corporation the whole time. Even if you started out as a corpo, which I did,
Right.
you were still on this us versus them situation. And it really didn't matter in the end. I think it was possible for you to get one ending where you actually did overcome the system, but that's like one out of, I think, 6 possible endings. So no one really got that one. And I think I did, if I don't remember correctly, I think I did the frontal assault, but I was so powerful that it wasn't even that hard. But at this point, I'm not super sure anymore.
Yeah.
I remember what happened at the very end, and I still won't spoil it with you, but it was frustrating.
Well, I know that they're releasing DLC for Cyberpunk. There's more of a finale for Johnny Silverhands. I mean, they kind of flesh out his ending a little bit better in the DLC, and I don't know if that's free or if it should be.
He was the best part about it by far, but of any game, Cyberpunk 2077 was pure illusion of choice.
Right. Okay. Well, see, and I think that's a good example, or a good, it's a good example of maybe the differences in some of these games where Mass Effect had what seemed to be a choice that had real world consequences. You saw the effect of it. It rippled on planets. Like you could go to other planets and see the effect of a decision I made in the first game. and it would affect others later on. A decision I made with a human on this planet on the news would have an impact in the third game over here, and it was really cool how they trace those threads. Sometimes I think the games get so big that they lose sight of a lot of these threads and maybe even of the illusion of choice. And over the course of creating that narrative, the choices really end up not mattering. And so it's situations like that. So Cyberpunk may be a cautionary tale of that, where incorporating choice is nice if it can be done, but doing it well is the key. So I guess that's a good place to kind of segue this. Do you have any last thoughts or closing arguments with including choice? Because I guess that's really where a good way to segue this to the end.
I would just say, like, sometimes choices can really be done right. Game developers can make the choice to listen to their fandom and create a game that people love. You can write in compelling dialogue that gamers never forget. I mean, Telltale's "I Love You, Brother" comes to mind instantly. Yeah. Just a few words of dialogue changed my recollection of the game forever. And you can offer people ways to make the choice to protect themselves, and it won't cost you anything, right. And you can make the choice to offer premium editions for collectors and things like that instead of just trying to rip them off with an unfinished game.
Right.
I think that everyone has choices, gamers as consumers and developers, about the type of games that we want to be a part of. But there are definitely great examples of where choice has been used to benefit the community instead of hurt it.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's probably the most difficult thing to do in gaming is to create these narratives where choices matter and they ripple effect across that either one game or multiple games. I think Telltale is a good example of a company that did it well and poorly, sometimes in the same game, where you would have choices that seem to make sense. Then you would have choices that you made that would be infuriating because they'd immediately be dismissed by a character you just chose to save getting killed in the next scene, And so it's like, what's the point? Unless that is the point. And that's something I can get behind. But creating games like that, listening to the developers, people who actually write these games and get paid to write these games, instead of the companies looking at how can we make the most money out of this product by cutting this and adding this and making it more of a subscription based or a time sink where you have to continue to invest to get more out of it instead of writing a cohesive narrative. And actually shipping that out. I think choice in gaming is the difference maker in games that are considered art. And not all games that have choice are that way. And that whole art moniker is not exclusive to games where choice is an option. I just think that the best games to me, the ones that have that lasting feeling, are the ones that do tell a narrative, do have a story, do have some sort of journey that you go on. They don't even have to have dialogue to be a great memorable gaming experience. But there is a journey that you're taking on, and it does have to be done well. And you can create a journey without words that way, just with the environment. But the ones where you can invest in the character, you see the impact, you have emotional investment in them. Those are the ones that really, I think, stick with you. It's not easy to do, but the ones I think that have been done well, they stand out and they're memorable. They're classics of, the all-time best. So that is my opinion anyway.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, that wraps up this episode of Retro Rebel. I want to thank Amanda for this week's discussion. All the notes from this week's episode will be posted on our site, templeofgeek.com. If you'd like to add to the discussion or reach out with questions, sound off in the comments or message us on Facebook or Instagram at Retro Rebel Podcast. And please head over to wherever you get your podcasts and rate us, because that really helps our show. Until the next time.
See you later.